people come to the U.S. specifically just to give birth so their kids have American citizenship.
Your client would help a Chinese national give birth in the United States, correct?
That's true.
Some say it's not just about fairness, it's about national security.
It opens the door for a number of potential security risks.
They're looking for that miracle of having a child. They're not thinking about a passport.
Let me ask you something. Is citizenship something you're born with, or can you buy your way into it? Now, I know some of you might be thinking, what's the big deal? But let me tell you, this whole issue of birth tourism, where foreign nationals come to the U.S. just to give birth so their child can claim citizenship, well, it's a game changer. Some say it's not just about fairness, it's about national security. And here's another twist. For some people, this is a legal option. For others, it's just a loophole. But now we've got a new wrinkle, international surrogacy. Parents overseas are hiring American women to carry their babies. These parents never set foot in the U.S., yet their child walks away with a shiny new U.S. passport.
A growing number of women in the U.S. are becoming surrogates for wealthy Chinese couples who can't have children of their own for biological or legal reasons.
Coming here to the U.S., for one, their child will be a U.S. citizen. I'm sure that has some draw to it.
Birthright citizenship is the concept that any child born on U.S. soil automatically receives U.S. citizenship, no matter where the child's parents are from. The idea of citizenship birthright comes from the language of the 14th Amendment.
Well, I think when the 14th Amendment was done, I don't think people assumed that a lot of folks would travel here to have babies, to have citizenship.
So-called anchor babies are those born to non-citizens on U.S. soil as a way for other family members to secure U.S. citizenship.
If Mr. Trump got his way, most children born in the U.S. to foreign parents wouldn't automatically be American citizens. It is part of the new White House immigration crackdown.
There are only 30 countries that practice birthright citizenship, making the U.S. kind of an anomaly. 56% of Americans want it gone.
Tonight, we're not chasing headlines, we're looking at the facts. And we start with a case that made national news. A married couple from China ran a birth tourism business in Los Angeles for wealthy Chinese clients. Visas, housing, coaching, all designed to help their clients' children be born American. Now, they're both serving time in federal prison. But this case opens the door to a much bigger conversation. Here's their story.
A massive FBI raid against a growing trend in the United States. Tens of thousands of pregnant women, mostly from China, coming to the United States to give birth because they want their babies to be American citizens.
An out-front investigation found a birth tourism ring running openly out of this Los Angeles area home.
You came here to have your baby in America?
Yes. That's the goal of the lucrative shadow industry that federal agents are investigating. It's known as birth tourism, catering to mainly Chinese mothers. The promise? Come pregnant to America. Your baby goes home a U.S. citizen.
It certainly raises security questions about what happens to these Chinese babies carrying U.S. passports as adults.
Joining us virtually is John McNicholas, the attorney who represented the woman who ran USA Happy Baby Inc. in her federal case. And John, thank you so much for joining me today. You represented a Chinese client accused of running a birth tourism business. What were the key arguments in their case?
Well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Phil, for having me on. The case of USA Happy Baby involved the U.S. Attorney's Office from the Central District of California indicting a business and the two owners of the business for operating a birth tourism company out of the San Bernardino County area it was basically a company that was supposed to be around for maybe between 2 to 5 years at the time of the indictment.
And the case was brought when? When was the case originally filed?
There was a grand jury that met over the course of, I would say, 3 to 4 years, because the original grand jury actually was excused before the indictment could be issued. So from the information that I was provided, the final grand jury was able to reach a true bill in 2019. That's when the indictment was filed.
And was this a surprise that this was considered criminal? And what was the actual charge that was levied against your client?
Okay, well, as you may know, during the Obama years, birth tourism was actually encouraged. So there was a movement to welcome birth tourism, to consider giving birth to a child healthcare, and that birth tourists were to be given the same welcome that people from foreign countries would be given if they were coming to the U.S. to have any other kind of medical procedure. So that was the feeling during the Obama years. During the Trump first term, the sentiment obviously changed, and it wasn't until several years after our clients were apprehended that the policy on birth tourism was changed to specifically exclude those people from being allowed to enter the country. In 2015, when the USA Happy Baby offices were raided, we actually had that Obama policy in place. And so it's ironic that that was the timing that they actually conducted the search and they charged these individuals. The crime, not birth tourism, the crime was immigration fraud and international money laundering. So very creative charges, considering it's not really about the fraud that happened in another country or at customs. It's the end result was to try to stop these tourist companies.
Help our viewers understand, your client would help in this case, a Chinese national give birth in the United States, correct?
That's true.
And how much would they charge for this?
It could be anywhere from $20,000 and up. But I will say this, and regarding the facts of the case and issues that are not on the record, this case is still going. It's on appeal right now.
Right.
So I have to be very cautious in the information that I share with you, because I do not want to jeopardize the appeal.
Of course, and I won't consider it rude at all for you to tell me can't answer, don't ask me that, you can't respond. So I totally get it. Let's discuss preparedness, because we know emergencies happen when we least expect them, but instead of just taking it, we can prepare. Let's discuss Jace Case, one of your most important preparation tools. With Jace Case, you'll have emergency prescription medications on hand right when you need them. Think about it. Ever been caught off guard? Whether it's a sudden illness or a travel hiccup, the right medications can make all the difference. Jace Case is designed to take that worry off your plate, so when a minor health issue pops up, it doesn't turn into a major problem. Don't let unforeseen circumstances derail your plans or your peace of mind. Live with confidence. Take charge with Jace today. Visit jace.com and use code PHIL for a discount on your order and get emergency antibiotics on hand for the moment you need them. That's JASE.com, code PHIL, PHIL. Despite some post-election optimism, Wall Street is already bracing for a rough rest of 2025. When Warren Buffett starts dumping blue chip stocks and stacking up cash, you've got to ask yourself, what does he see coming? I trust Preserve Gold to safeguard my accounts, and I urge you to do the same. They're the only precious metals company I recommend. When uncertainty is this high, smart people look for stability. That's why physical gold and silver might just be what your finances need. Text Dr. Phil to 50505 to get your free Precious Metals Guide from Preserve Gold. With gold prices recently breaking records and analysts predicting this trend to continue through 2025, you cannot afford to wait. As a bonus, you can get up to $15,000 with a qualified purchase from Preserve Gold. So don't wait. Text Dr. Phil, that's DRPHIL, to 50505 today. But it's my understanding that you say 20,000 and up, that in some cases they paid as much as $100,000 to come here and have their baby. What was the difference between 20,000 and 100,000?
Well, the record doesn't speak to that.
Okay.
The record really doesn't even get into it. There were allegations that there were different levels, according to the advertisements that were found. But as far as what the government was actually able to prove, money wasn't even an issue. So yeah, you could say there was different levels, different programs that individuals would get based on the amount of money they would pay, but none of that was really part of the case. It wasn't even really relevant to the case.
Was the objection focused more on the fact that they were coming here to have a baby to establish citizenship?
Absolutely. It came down to what these women were telling United States authorities when they were applying for their visas, what they were telling customs when they arrived in the United States, and how they behaved on an airplane on their way to getting to the United States, and whether they were coached to behave a certain way. So I will say this, there was no evidence my client ever coached any birth tourist. The business, USA Happy Baby, was completely in San Bernardino County. So anything that went on in China or anywhere before the planes landed at, let's say, LA Airport, the defendants had nothing to do with that.
I've got 100 questions here. Some you might can answer and some you can't. Now, some claim that the Chinese Communist Party is involved in the surrogacy industry, but others dismiss this as nothing but fear-mongering. We're going to add to the conversation a man who challenges these concerns. We'll be right back.
Birth tourism. Come pregnant to America, give birth here, and your baby goes home a U.S. citizen, thanks to the 14th Amendment. The business of birth tourism starts in Beijing. Storefronts like this one and this one offer package deals. On Chinese language websites, they advertise to parents, offer a step-by-step guide to obtain a U.S. visa, and then arrange travel to cushy, inviting U.S. homes, where 24-hour nurses and doctors will care for the mother. Under current federal laws, coming to the United States just to have a baby is legal.
Parham Zar has worked in the surrogacy business for nearly 25 years. As head of a California-based agency, he's helped families from around the world, including many from China, where surrogacy is banned, navigate the process legally and ethically. He's here to explain how surrogacy works in the U.S. and why it's very different from birth tourism. So, Parham, thank you for joining us, and explain the difference and how this can be done properly as opposed to improperly.
First, thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for covering this very important topic. When we talk about surrogacy and infertility, the topic should not be political fear. It should really be about the people who have been through exhaustive different infertility options where they were, whether it's China or anywhere else in the world, and ultimately landing here where we have the best medical technology and also stellar laws that will protect the intended parents and the surrogate through the entire surrogacy journey. There is a pre-birth judgment, for example, that is placed. So when the intended parents come to the United States in order to have their child, they come with all those fears, and ultimately they're looking for that miracle of having a child and to hold that child. They're not thinking about a passport or whether their child will be a citizen. They're worried, will I finally be able to hold my child? Will the surrogate take good care of herself while she's pregnant? Will my baby be healthy? Will the hospital allow me to be in the room when my baby is born? So these are the things that they are really concerned about, and not about the passport.
But a passport is involved in this. And John, when we saw these storefronts in China, were those storefronts associated with your clients here in the United States, or did they have anything to do with your clients here in the United States?
I don't have any knowledge of storefronts in China offering this type of service. I do know that there were different consulting firms, travel agencies operating out of China who would advertise these types of services. I don't think people could just walk into a neighborhood store though and buy a birth tourism package. I think it was a significant process that involved going to a travel agent, going through the visa process. It was a long ordeal that, as far as I know, it lasted several months in China before the people ever came to the United States.
Well, Parham, we're using China as an example. How do people find their way to service providers in the United States if they're in China? How do they identify a service provider in the United States if they're in China?
A lot of fertility clinics, agencies, actually, we would go to China. Mostly pre-COVID is when this was happening, but we would go to China and discuss fertility options that they can do. The medical tourism. Medical tourism is not something new. People from all over the world come to the United States for all sorts of cancer treatments, surgeries, and yes, infertility, which is a very important aspect. Wealth doesn't eliminate infertility. So when people are faced with this terrible truth that they need the help of someone else to have a child, they will find the information that they need to find in order to have that baby. Clinics, agencies, we will travel to China, have symposiums, educate people, just as we do in the United States, just as we do in Europe and everywhere else in the world, and invite them to avail themselves of the terrific medical technology that we have in the United States, the legal protections that we have for the intended parents and everybody else involved in the United States.
John, I'm asking if your clients advertised in China to offer the kind of services that Parham is saying his clients are looking for.
That actually goes towards the essence of the case. And I will tell you from my client's perspective, there was no advertising in China. It was done by Chinese companies. So there was a distinct line that was drawn, in their minds at least, for conducting a US-based business versus a international business, because there's too much involved when you have a family running an operation in San Bernardino County. It's hard to control what goes on in China. So if in fact anything was happening in China, it was the Chinese consultants that would handle it, and they would actually contract with different companies here in California to run these birthing houses. And that's what these people did. They ran a birthing house, and that was their primary function.
Okay, I've got a question that both of you can address. We have to take a quick break, and then I'll ask about it. Coming up, could the U.S. surrogacy system be creating a hidden national security vulnerability? A researcher warns that surrogate-born U.S. citizens raised in China might eventually pose risk by infiltrating sensitive industries or advancing foreign interest. You know, it's a possibility, it's a speculation, it is a theory, and we'll add that to the conversation after we come back. If you're a business owner, listen up now. You won't want to miss this. Are you sure you're not leaving money on the table when it comes time to exit? Well, thousands of business owners have already used FYSI's exit strategy and valuation services to sell smart and profit big. Why? FYSI will help you plan and position your business for the maximum return. This is what separates billion-dollar companies from small businesses. And FYSI can help you secure your legacy. Time matters. So don't wait until it's too late. Use promo Dr. Phil, DRPHIL, to schedule your free $5,000 risk assessment at fysi.com/Dr. Phil or call 800-877-4000. That's promo code Dr. Phil to schedule your assessment for free. Visit fysi.com/Dr. Phil or call 800-877-4000 today.
We're going to talk about birth tourism. Kind of similar as to us going to other countries to seek medical tourism, but this one is people that come to the US specifically just to give birth so their kids have American citizenship. There's actual agencies that will assist people and consult people throughout their pregnancy with prenatal care, setting up doctor's appointments, Airbnbs, and everything people need to come here and give birth. The main countries that come to the US to give birth are Brazil is one of the top 10, but I think the number one is China. This is not much of a cultural shock as much as it is something that not a lot of people are aware it exists. This is not a new concept. This has been a thing for like years and years.
Emma Waters, a policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation, has been studying international surrogacy and birth tourism for years. She says this trend goes beyond personal choice, raising significant policy concerns, from Chinese families pursuing U.S. citizenship for their children to potential security risk. And Emma says the implications could extend far beyond the delivery room. Emma, thank you for coming on and talking about this.
Of course. Thank you for having me on.
What ethical concerns do you have for foreign nationals using U.S. surrogates? Because I've been talking to John McNicholas and Parham Zar, and I assume you've been listening to that, and they both say that this is not motivated in any way by getting U.S. citizenship or for political reasons, and don't think it's a risk at all, if I'm paraphrasing them properly. Why do you think it could be an issue?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. And for anyone listening to this who's just heard that estimated 50,000 Chinese nationals birth children in the United States every year, that should pique your interest. What this means is that the moment that they're born, they have the full rights of U.S. citizenship. So as the other guests have alluded to, this of course does not mean that many or even the majority of these individuals have nefarious ends in mind. But what it does introduce is a major national security risk that I think Americans would be very wise to pay attention to. The analogy I like to use here are Chinese nationals who are buying up farmland around military bases in the United States. Is it necessarily illegal for Chinese nationals or Chinese corporations to own farmland directly surrounding some of our military bases? No, but is that wise for a country who has positioned itself as one of the greatest adversaries to the United States to own land in such sensitive areas? No, again, right? Like we should think a little more closely or a little more carefully about the role that China's playing when it comes to our research, when it comes to Hollywood, academia, sensitive jobs, and also the children who are being born here. Because the primary concern that comes from this is that when these children turn 18 or 21, if they are to return to the United States after being raised geographically and culturally in China, they would have access to the full rights and benefits of American American citizenship as a child who was raised here. And again, culturally speaking, there's going to be a massive difference between a child who's raised and assimilated in the cultures and way of life and values of the United States and really views the United States as their primary country versus a person who's not spent any meaningful time here and for all intents and purposes views China as their primary nation. It opens the door for a number of potential security risks, especially when it comes to academia sharing research or applying for jobs in sensitive areas, that I think is just an unnecessary risk for the United States to open itself up to.
Well, I'm a little curious, John and Parham, about people coming to the United States to do this when there are 50 countries in the world where both mother and child statistically have a better chance of survival than in the United States. And we have the highest priced healthcare and some of the lowest quality of delivery right now. We've got an upside down system. I know we have the best technology, but our delivery in the healthcare system is really not good. And as I say, there are 50 countries where the mother and child have a better chance of surviving than in the United States. I know that has to do with where you are in the socioeconomic strata, but I'm wondering why, generally speaking, people would be so anxious to get here to do this. Parham, go ahead.
Yes. So first of all, with political fear, it's very easy to assume malintent. The intended parents that are coming here for infertility and for having their child, they are not thinking about whether my child is going to be a U.S. citizen or is that going to give me any benefits. That's a long road ahead for them. That's 21 years later if they can even use that. They are coming here because I don't agree with what you said. The medical technology in the United States, at least when it comes to fertility, IVF, and the ability to really create that life and miracle at the end of the day, bar none, is the best than anywhere else in the world. And that is why a lot of intended parents from all over the world come to the United States, not just from China. And their biggest concern most of the time is to be able to go back home. And even though they have a pre-birth judgment in the United States that recognizes the parents as the actual parents of the child, their main concern is whether at home, when they go back home, their government in their home will recognize the child as theirs. So these are the fears that they're dealing with, not thinking about whether the passport that they're getting for their child will ultimately lead to a citizenship for the baby or for them.
Parham argues that children born through U.S. surrogacy to Chinese parents aren't here to infiltrate. And coming up, he explains why he believes these children, if they return, will return to contribute, not to contaminate or take away. And we'll talk about that after the break.
Countries are now using international surrogacy programs to rent wombs in America. The majority of these birth tourists come from one of America's greatest adversaries, including China.
And there's anywhere from 125,000 to 300,000, depending upon whose estimates you're looking at, incidences of birth tourism each year. So this is something that is dangerous. We need a firm policy against it. And it is something that places the United States at a great deficit in terms of national security.
We've been talking about birthright citizenship and the growing debate around how it's being used, or some say misused. From traditional birth tourism to international surrogacy, families around the world, especially from China, are finding legal ways to have children born in the United States. And Emma and John and Parham are here, and we're talking about whether this is a legitimate thing for people to seek out globally, or if it is a national security risk for us. And President Trump has signed an executive order 14160 titled Protecting the Meaning and Value of American Citizenship, which has taken a step to safeguard the integrity of U.S. citizenship. And the order seeks to end automatic citizenship for children born to parents who are not U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents, even if they are in the country legally on temporary visas when a child is born. And Parham, you say you hope the children do come back and come back as taxpayers and meaningfully contribute to society here in the United States. I mean, that's your hope, right?
That is absolutely my hope. My hope is that every single one of them will ultimately move to the United States, start businesses, and become tax-paying citizens, because certainly we need it. Now, when it comes to the fears of whether they will become spies or whether they will pose a national security, every child that's born in the United States, one could argue that has the same opportunities, the same freedoms, the same, they can avail themselves of all sorts of theories and political leanings within this country. This is what is the beauty of this country. We always invite discourse. And so no citizen of the United States, we can impose on them a certain political view. So to have this fear that anyone who's a United States citizen can't express themselves in the right way, I think is incorrect.
But you don't think they would be at the same risk as someone that would be raised under the shadow of the CCP?
I don't know if you've ever met most of the Chinese citizens that we are communicating with. And I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've met hundreds and hundreds of them. They are more concerned about how their families will be treated and how they can integrate their child into the community and society at home, rather than whether they're taking guidance from the political doctrine within their country.
And listen, I don't have a problem with Chinese people at large at all. My concern is with the Communist Party in China. And I think most of the people that leave China are leaving it because of the Communist Party in China, not to do their bidding. I think they're doing it to get away from that. So I'm not at all casting aspersions on Chinese people, but it's just like people that are coming in across the southern border. They often are indebted to the cartels in order to get here, and their families are left behind. And so there's great leverage that they have against their families. It's like, do what we need you to do, want you to do, or we're going to torture your family, kill your family. And so they have great leverage against them. And Emma, that's what you're concerned about, right?
Dr. Phil, you made the perfect analogy for this. I think that's a very apt way to describe the situation. And something in what you said, Parham, really stood out to me is you talked about how the Chinese nationals who are coming, and are coming for various reasons, right? Their goal is to bring their child home to assimilate them into their Chinese culture, which is right and good. Every child should be raised to love and appreciate the country that they're in and from. But that's the precise disagreement we have about birthright citizenship. Because with birthright citizenship, we are not actively acting to assimilate these children into America and into the great tradition that we're a part of, but we're actively giving them the benefit of citizenship without the corresponding duties and national expectations that come with that. So this is not, to be clear, saying that foreign nationals shouldn't have citizenship. That's not at all the discussion here. The point is that those who are interested in citizenship should go through the proper immigration channels to apply. And so while you've given broad references to the Chinese nationals or foreign nationals that you've worked with, I think it's really important to, again, keep in mind what's being marketed. So when President Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship came out, I tracked a number of surrogacy agencies, particularly those working with foreign nationals, who began quickly uploading articles from their legal scholars saying, don't worry, guys, I know that citizenship, and particularly birthright citizenship, as one of the primary things that you're interested in. And don't worry, we have the legal channels to preserve this. And others had similar lines, recognizing that for whatever the situation may call for that attracts foreign nationals, that birthright citizenship is a large benefit. Otherwise, why wouldn't they go to a country that's closer, from Ukraine or other nations that allow international commercial surrogacy? There's a reason, even beyond the high-tech surrogacy and medical benefits, that attract people to the United States. And instead of going through an immigration loophole through birthright citizenship, why not simply wait and apply through the proper channels? And so that's very similar to what Australia has, for example. They do have birthright citizenship, but the birthright citizenship is contingent on those children remaining in Australia for 10 years after they're born, because they want to ensure that those children have the values of an Australian citizen to really enjoy not only the benefits, but also appreciate the duties. And so it seems it's a very reasonable thing to then expect foreign nationals who are coming to the United States to abide by very similar rules, or not simply get birthright citizenship to begin with. And there are other surrogacy agencies as well who have openly said that, or have openly positioned themselves as a cheaper alternative to the EP5 visa, which is the typical immigration status visa. So again, this doesn't mean that they have bad intentions, right? Or that their number one priority is citizenship, but it again points to the fact that citizenship through this immigration loophole or fraud, as it's oftentimes carried out, is one of the primary drivers that at least many of these surrogacy companies are advertising through.
I have to stop here and take a break. We'll be right back. We're back and we're hearing the debate. And John, I'm curious how you see your client's role, and we can talk about this hypothetically. People in a role like your clients, how do they fit into all of this? Is it a matter of just providing a service and should not be held accountable for potential fallout from it? It's not illegal. You say it's not illegal, and apparently, certainly at the time that it was happening, it was not illegal. How do you make sense of this?
Well, I think if you look at the potential threat from China versus the potential threat from the southern border, you talk about maybe 33,000 people living here from China, when in fact we have 4.4 million child citizens of the United States from illegal immigrants in general. That's a recent Pew Research Center number. The Chinese number is really small. So as far as the local maternity house is concerned, it's a business. It's clearly something that seemed lucrative, at least during the pre-Trump years, that there was a big demand for Chinese women wanting to have American children. And at the time, it looked like a really good business opportunity because it was a small area. Nobody had really explored it yet, but it became a big and lucrative area. And as long as the laws were not violated, business could thrive off of it. So the idea is, if you're going to operate a maternity house in California and you're servicing citizens of China, you try to make sure that everything you do is based on the laws of the United States, and that these people come to this country legally. And when you greet them, they have their own doctors already lined up. Their housing is already lined up. Their as far as their plans for their new child, everything is in place when they get here. So the Chinese women who come to this country typically are in a position where they can afford to be here. They're by and large, they're not poor families. These are people who have the ability to be here. They're able to pay for their services. They do not become a drain on the economy. They don't go on the welfare rolls, but they're able to afford whatever it is they're doing. Eventually, in the birth tourism world, the families return to China, but they do come back again because it is very common for the birth tourists not to just do this one time, but do this 2 to 3 times as well. So you could have some pretty large families coming out of that, and eventually everybody in that family will end up a U.S. citizen, including mom and dad.
All right, we'll be right back. We're back, and we're talking about an issue that I think people have a lot of different views on, whether it's international surrogacy or birth tourism. Emma, let me ask you, is it your understanding now after Executive Order 14160, I need you to be very brief because I want to hear from y'all, is this shut down now? Is it not going to happen, at least for the next 4 years?
It's legally ambiguous is the short answer. The executive order is based upon the biological progenitor of the child in question, which is very tricky because in surrogacy, the gestational mother, the surrogate, is not the biological mother. The intended parents who are coming from another country can also use egg and sperm and therefore not be the biological parent, though they're the intended parent.
Okay. Are you still looking, Parham, for people to find their IVF services here?
I completely disagree with the premise of what we just heard, because the parents, whenever there is political upheaval or questions about whether they will be, parents can be here and they can ultimately have their child get a birth certificate is what they're worried about. They just want to make sure our name's going to be placed on that birth certificate for our baby. And are we ultimately able to hold our child? So they are not thinking about whether they're going to be able to get a golden visa or not. They just want to have their child.
Okay, well, I think we're going to have a lot of controversy about this when people see this, and we'll hear from them, and I hope I can talk to you guys again. I want to thank John McNicholas, Parham Zar, and Emma Waters for enlightening us about this. I think it's something a lot of people don't know much about and need to. For more information about tonight's episode, I want you to log on to merittv.com. I really appreciate your being here. Let us hear from you about this, what you think about it, how you think this should all turn out. Thank you so much for being here. Good night.